In the application, we have all the dialogues obviously working at runtime. So we've known this for a while, and this is good. But one of the slightly annoying things is inside of the designer, the dialogues don't work for a pretty obvious reason, because of the dependency injection being spun up in the application, which doesn't run in the designer. It has no concept of the application. So I've thought of a good way to attempt to fix this. It's quite a lot of work, but I think in the end it's then going to be worth it so that we can have more of a complete UI experience inside the designer. So there's two main problems here. The first problem we need to tackle is in the main view. If we search for, I believe it's called Dialog, there we go, we have Dialog Overlay. So this is some UI that's existing directly in a main view, nowhere else. So this is where the dialogues get injected into. If we want to do anything else except have them in the main view, for example, in the designer of, say, the history page, we need this page to also have somewhere to host them dialogues. So that's the first thing we need to do. And then after that, we need to inject this overlay into both places. So we should be able to leave this overlay in the main view as just the runtime overlay. But then in the designer, inject a separate one if this doesn't exist. And then it should work pretty cool, and we should be able to actually go to, for example, the action print and click this button and get an overlay working. So let's start off with the first step, and that's to create something to locate the top level, because the way the dialog works, and we touched on this with the new design data, injecting things, we have this mock top level service. So until we have a top level where we can inject something in, we're dead in the water. So we need to first fix this issue with top level service provider. At runtime, that's easy. We just check the application lifetime, get the top window or the single view if it's in like a mobile app, and you can literally call get top level on that main window and we're done. But in the designer, that's going to be a little bit more complicated. The way we're going to do that is every time one of these design windows gets spun up, we're going to register it into, similar to the designer here being static, we're going to have a static top level so that every time you open up a design window and compile, it overrides the static stored value for a top level item. So if it works correctly, it'll work pretty cool. The first thing we're going to have to do then is create a top level locator, we'll call this. I'm going to put it in the dialog because really at the minute the top level is only used for dialogues. So we'll call this top level locator. This wants to be static. Inside of here, we're going to have a private static, and now we can have a top level reference, which will be nullable until we have it, and we can do top level. But the one thing with this, generally, when you have something that's been bound to or injected during design time, so like in here, these, when you compile them, are going to inject a dependency into here, or effectively a reference to the top level. Then when you open this window and compile, you're going to then override this. Now, the garbage collection should automatically, because one is over in the other, dispose of the previous one. But we can just do an extra safe check here. And it's just, again, good practice. It's not needed, and I doubt it's going to do anything without it for now. But if we do this instead and make a weak reference, it will be exactly the same, but it will allow this application, basically this static that's going to be running in the background, to dispose of this reference if it goes out of context. So if this window closes, but the static is still alive, it won't keep hold of this reference and prevent this from disposing. But as I say, it's only ever going to keep one in memory at a time, because as soon as another one compiles, the reference is lost and it would dispose. But this is really just a better way of doing that. After this, the way we're going to hook into the top level, or effectively the way we're going to have this top level overridden, is using an Avalonia attached property, so that we can go into the views and attach properties to the pages using similar syntax to this. And that will trigger then, whenever the page is compiled, a property to spin up. And all we have to notify is when the property changes, effectively, when it's created or changed as it will be, we can then run some custom code. So we'll make a public static read-only Avalonia property. So nothing special here. We'll just do a Boolean because we've got to do a kind. So just true or false, and we can then use that to say whether to capture the top level or not. We'll just call it capture property, I guess. capture top level property. Let's call it that. Well, let's just call it capture top level for now. Keep it a bit smaller. We then want to attach this. So we need to say what kind of properties can use this Avalonia property. So that's in Avalonia property, I believe. Dot register. So this is all standard stuff for attached properties at the minute. We'll do register attached, not just register. And then in here, we need to tell it the type. So we're going to go as low as, say, just a control. So pretty much any control then. We're only really going to use it in user controls and Windows. But to make it flexible, we might as well just say control. There's no real reason why we can't do that, because from a control, we can pull out a top level element. So we have the attached registered to any controls, and it's obviously of a type Boolean. The name is capture, which we can change to name of capture property, I believe. Oh no, actually, we will need to just say name capture, otherwise you're going to have the word property after it. And then it's type of top level locator, so inside this class. So now this class has a property called capture that we can attach to inside of the XAML. And if you're curious then how this is going to be used, let's say we went to this actions print view. Ultimately, we're not ready for it yet, but it would appear here. And we'd say something like dialog, which would be a namespace into this dialog service. And then you do colon. It would be top level locator dot capture equals true. Equals true, like this. And all we'll be doing then is attaching this property to this control, and then saying true, so we can literally just quickly change this to true or false if we liked. And when that gets changed, which will get changed when this control is compiled in the designer, we can then do something with it. So that's what's going to happen there. Now, if you look up the Avalonia documentation, as well as having the property, you can't just do the property. You need to expose the same things, so the same name, but as getters and setters, so that the UI, when we attach to it here, can actually set this value. So it's going to look explicitly using reflection for certain names. So we need to make it a public static, and you can see it's recommended in IntelliSense already, and public static Boolean and get capture. So it's going to look for the word get, followed by the name before property. So it's going to look for the word exactly get capture. It's going to expect the type to be this, and the return type to be this. So it's all going to be looked at automatically by Avalonia. And then for that, we just need to return the control, which is the thing that's passed in, get value. And what this is going to do, this control will be this window, and the get value is then going to look for the property. If we were to put it on here, it's going to look for this property here. Well, this property here, the attached property, and get the value of it. So that's what this does. And this is Avalonia doing it for us. So for that, we just need to do get value of the capture property. And I believe that should be right. I'm not sure why that's complaining. It's going to return an object. So an override for type. There we go. So we can use the generic. So it tells it that the return type is expected to be Boolean. And then you can do a public static void, and this time set capture, and it's figured it all out for us. You want to set it from the control with a value. We get the same control, set the value, and update it. So that's all. Effectively, all that is just an Avalonia attached property. Now comes the magic. So we will want, we'll do a static constructor for this class. In here now, we want to say on the capture property, whenever it changes, so this is for any control that has one, we want to add a handler, and it wants to be for the control. And then we have the first object will be the control, and then the event args is after, which needs an extra bracket like so. And now in here, this will fire whenever any of them change. So every time one of these designers is built, it will fire this property change method here. So the first thing, let's get the value, which is enabled. IntelliSense has got it right, I presume, yeah. Control.getValue, it's a Boolean and the capture property. Now this is going to fetch it back off that, but we don't really need to do this. We can actually just do, in the event args, we have the new value, so we can do that easier. We can say new value is Boolean to double check. And we can say, if it is a Boolean, make it B, and then do a double check like this. So this funny syntax is basically saying if it's a Boolean and it's true, otherwise it's going to be false. IntelliSense might be suggesting a better way to do that. Yep, there we go. So it's got a nice way to say it much easier, which is if the new value is a Boolean and it is true, we know it's then enabled. So that's the way we'll do it. Now we know if it's enabled, so if we specified true in here, we can now do something. So instead of doing that, we could just return, because we don't want to nest an if, but we're also going to have an else clause. So if it isn't enabled, if it's false, we want to detach. So we will still have an if and an else, so we don't want to return, basically. So if it is true, we want to hook in. So what we do then, we get the control, which is the the control we actually want to add this UI to. We want to attach to visual tree. So we're going to wait for this control, let's say this one, for example, to attach itself to this visual tree, which means the actual designer's visual tree. And we want to hook into the event. So we'll call it control on attached to visual tree. And I probably should have had that automatically generate it for us. So there we go. So now we've got when it attaches to the tree, we can do something. We also, because this can be fired multiple times, we're best doing a minus first to remove any existing handlers. And to be honest then, the else would have been, if you disabled it, remove the event handler like this. But then we can quite obviously simplify this logic instead and just do remove it either way. And if it's going to be reattached, reattach it. So that's cleaner logic now. So all this does is every time the value changes from true or false, we listen out for the property tree changing. And now in here, if we get this event, we know we're expected to be a UI that wants to capture the top level. So at this point now, we need to capture the top level. So that should be fairly easy. If sender is a control, which it should be, there's no reason it shouldn't be, we can now try and capture the control. So we will do try capture top level, pass in the control, make a function, and we don't want to return anything. There we go. And then in here now we need to capture the top level. However, when we attach and the property changes, at this point it's already been set to true, and we might already be in the visual tree. So let's just have a double check here, actually in here then, maybe. We might be going overkill here, but let's just cover all bases and say try capture, because if it fails anyway. So we'll try and capture, try and get the top level now. And if it fails, it fails. If it works, it works. Capture top level if anything changes in the tree. Detach previous event. Oh no, I spelled detach right. I looked wrong then. What's this telling us now? Invert the if. Yeah, I suppose now we can invert the if because we've changed this priority. And so the last thing to do is try and now get the top level. So this shouldn't be too hard, because now what we should have is the control, which is this user control, which is what we want. And we just want to now store it in this top level here. We want to set this top level to whichever one that is. So how do we do that? First, we want to do a try catch, because this could fail and we don't want to crash the designer. We don't care about that, but can I do this? Dismiss, not log, not throw, and then ignored. There we go. So if this is just a try catch, but if I wanted to debug, I can see. In fact, I probably couldn't debug here anyway. It's design time stuff. We want to get the var top level will equal, and again, now we can just use the exact same thing. Top level dot what was it? Get top level, I think. Yeah, get top level with the control. And you'll notice now this is identical to the main app's top level dot get top level. It's just that instead of it being the main window, we're now passing in whatever we find. So there's no reason this shouldn't work. And I guess if it does, so if top level isn't equal to null, we then want to update the top level. So that will be the top level is a new weak reference to the top level. And if I've done all that correctly, then I think we're on to a winner. So with this now, we should be able to make, instead of having this separate one here, so registering here, let's delete that. Go into the register common services. This is obviously now where we could register the common service. We also want to delete the application service somehow this, we want to combine this into one service so it's shared. So we can, we'll this into one service so it's shared. So we can, we'll need this bit, I think. Yeah, so we'll cut this bit here. Delete that, because now we want to inject this in a common place. And that means in here, we will want to have a method for adding top level. So add top level locator. I'll come back to that in a minute, because we're going to then need, before we go too far out, where are we? I've already lost where we are. In here, we best make that helper method. So we'll do a public static void register top level provider. And this will have the service collection coming in, collection, and now we can just add to it like an extension method almost. We can just say collection dot, in fact I might make it an extension method. Let's just do it as a normal one for now. Add singleton. We'll have the func of top level question mark, I believe it was. And then we'll have the service provider. We have the double call because it's a service provider returning a method. And then I presume that's just complaining because we haven't returned anything yet. Just try return null, see if that syntax is right. Yeah, there we go. So in here now we just need to do what we did. So one was this for the normal thing. So if we add a reference there, we now need to find, we can't do this, we need to find the app, well, the application's lifetime. So to do that, we can just do application.current, and that'll get the current running app. And then because we want to call it twice, you can basically do application current, which might be null, because it depends where we're calling from, application lifetime. So this, instead of just being that, can be this, and we just have to null check if we have an application. So that's now the same. But before this, we need to check. What we'll do is, if we add this as the register top level and we're running the application, this will work. But before we do that, we want to check if the top level weak reference here has been set. The only place this will get set is at design time. So if this isn't null, we want to then not do this, and we want to register the design time top level, which is going to call into a method we also haven't made yet, which is to return this top level, if that makes sense. So if we find that we have a reference to top level, we return that. If we haven't, we get it from the current application like we already do. So this is a standard runtime get of top level. This one is if we have a design time set top level, use that. So to do that, we just need to first check if we're in design. Let's do a double check. We shouldn't need this, but we also want to make sure we're never returning the design time top level if we're running the application, in case something else goes wrong and some event fires and somehow we accidentally set this at runtime. We don't want that to then become the thing that overrides the dialogues, otherwise we're in trouble. So this is double checking we're in design time mode, and even then, we now just need to return the top level. But because it's a weak reference, we need to return. How do we do that? We've got to return, we should be able to do it in one line. Top level, question marks, it could be null, dot, try get target, I believe it is. What's it want for the target? It wants to set a level. So are we going to have to store that? I think we're going to have to do var top level equals top level, return top level, I guess, maybe. Is that all we need now? Oh, yeah, you don't return there, do you? You do that. Is that right? Let's change that to var. Let it be what it wants to be. And it's going to be a top level question mark, so just return top level then. Why is that complaining now? Might not be initialized before being accessed. Top level isn't. No, I think this is just IntelliSense getting a bit over. What? Yeah, that's definitely not right. I mean, we can obviously do return top level question mark null. really. So what we've got to do, top level question mark, top level equals null, ref out top level, return top level. Yeah, well, that seems a bit over. 3 lines to just basically do try get target. Is there another way of doing that easier? No, that's the only call we've got on a weak reference. So we don't technically need this weak reference. Like I say, it could just be a direct reference, but it's just a bit safer. So that will basically just return if there is a, here we go, if we're in Designer and it is a top level that's been set, we return it. If it then isn't in Designer, it's going to try and run this. So now we just need to call this register top level provider. And I think then we're done on this service here. So before we forget, let's call this. This will be in the bootstrapper and add in here. So at the minute we'd have to do top level locator dot register. This is top level provider and pass the collection in, but that doesn't go the same as this. So what I'll probably do is make it an extension method and call it probably add top level provider. So let's rename it first, and now let's make this an extension method, just doing this. And then instead of doing it that way, IntelliSense will now probably correct it to that way. So that just looks a bit nicer, just kind of falls in line with this. So I guess let's just see if the application runs still at the minute. It's not going to do much in the actual Designer because we don't really do much with it at the minute, but let's just check we haven't broke anything else. Yeah, so we know the injection is still working because obviously we've managed to do it. We could also say come to here, and if I think we probably have to restart the application now. But if we start the application up, you should see we hit this breakpoint. We won't be in design time mode, and it just runs the exact same code as you'd expect before. So we should hit this in a second. Try running the normal desktop for now without the double. Maybe that's messing up the breakpoints. Why is it not hitting breakpoints? What's going on? Okay, so we're hitting that. We're hitting that. Register common services. Okay, so the breakpoint in here, we're adding, oh, until we call it, it's not going to get invoked. That's why. So you've got to actually attempt to open a dialog. No? Okay. So we're never getting, it must be a debugger, just does not want to hit inside this function for some reason. Not the end of the world, but that's definitely a problem with the debugger. That should be hitting in here, and luckily we know it works because we can see it working. But yeah, that's a strange one. So now we have, hopefully and presumably, a top level. We could, how are we going to kind of show that we have a top level? Not sure, to be honest. I guess if we just finish the code, we'll know if it worked, because if we do have a top level, the dialog service can make use of it. So the next step to this puzzle is we need to inject a dialog. So we need to dynamically inject, ultimately, a dialog overlay like this, like a grid, if there isn't one. So how are we going to do that? What we're going to have to do is find on these controls, so pretty much any control, a user control is going to have a content control inside of it, which will be this thing here. So the first item that appears inside the user control. So what we want to do is take the content that's already in here and then wrap it in a grid. So we want to then put another grid around, replace the content that's actually inside of the designer, move this up inside the grid, and then add our overlay here. That's ultimately what we want to do, but in code behind, so that we can now add a grid with a z-index of something above and basically take this overlay here, take that overlay, paste it into here, and now we have a grid overlaid on top of the actual designer's UI. So that's what we want to do, but in design time. And actually, you know what? I think if we were to, let's see if we can do that first. I'm thinking if we do this now, the dialog will already work. So let's paste that in, cut that inside. So let's try and do it manually before we inject it dynamically. And now can we do this? So we don't have the span, we have a name. Is visible as dialog overlay. Ah, no, see, we don't have a dialog either. So we'd have to inject and bind dynamically at the same time as well. So yeah, let's ignore that. Let's go for the dynamic injection, because that's ultimately what we're doing. But we need to really do it dynamically, otherwise we can't bind the dialog either. So this is what's going to make the dialog actually pop up. We're going to dynamically inject into any of the views that we target. So let's just use this as an example. And we probably need another service then. So in dialog, we've got a dialog service. I'm going to make a dialog injector. This again, because it's design time, is going to be static. And then here we want the same thing. So we're going to have two things. We've got one that's going to be a top level injector or top level locator, which will be tagged on here as a property, which in fact we can now do. So let's just do that before I forget. So we'll have XML namespace colon dialog, we'll call this. This would be batch process3.dialog. And now in here we should be able to do dialog colon top level locator.capture is true. So that's going to fire off that event, which means the top level is going to be bound and it should work. And now we need another one that's going to inject a dialog. So we could do it all in this. We could literally make one service that injects the top level and adds a dialog. But this is useful on its own, just being able to inject the top level. It might not strictly be related to the dialog. So even though it's in the dialog's namespace for now, it might be split off. So now let's do pretty much the same thing we just did with the top level locator. We're going to make a dialog injector with the same thing. So we want public static read only attach property of Boolean. So pretty much, rinse and repeat. There we go. Type of Boolean. The property name is going to be add, I guess, add dialog. That'll do. The element, call it element, I guess. I think that should do. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try that again. That's kind of attempted to do all the automated stuff and failed. Attach property. There we go. So type of Boolean. Oh yeah, forget that. Let's just type to solve that IntelliSense. It's terrible. Public static read only attach property Boolean. Much quicker to just bloody type it. Add dialog property equals Avalonia property dot register attached. It wants to be a honor control, true or false. Add dialog type of this. We then need the public static Boolean get add dialog with a control, which is just the control dot get value Boolean of the property public static void set add dialog. There we go. So that's the attach property that the IntelliSense miserably failed to do. We'll do the same thing again. We need some references to things we're going to inject. So we're going to need two. We'll do static references again to keep all this thing safe. We'll have a weak reference, and this time we'll have the grid, which is going to be the overlay grid. So this is the one we're going to generate. So we'll call this one overlay grid. Then we're also going to have another one, which is going to be the content of the thing that we're putting inside the grid. So the actual, the view's entire content. So in this case, this stuff that whatever's in here that we're going to put inside of a new grid. So that will just be a content, well, it has to be a content presenter. Otherwise we can't do this. So it'll probably only work on user controls and Windows because they have content presenters inside. So it should be fine. But either way, we need to work with a content presenter because we need to obviously know that there's content that we can move around. So this will be then the original content, we'll call it. Make the static constructor exactly the same again as the top level. We're going to do the add dialog property change dot add class handler. Want it to be on a control. That goes in there. The first one is a control, so not O, we'll actually call it control. Same logic again. If we just go to the top level, we pretty much want the same logic. We still want the attached tree and return, and then we want to do, instead of try top capture, we just want to do try, I guess this will be try inject overlay. So we probably could have just copied that class because nearly all of this is the same. So there's the methods we need. Control attached to visual tree is going to say if the sender is a control. Then we will just do, what did we do in the other one? Capture top level control. So we just did whatever it was we were after, or try capture top level. So we did that. Are we calling that in more than? Oh yeah, we made it a function because we call it here and in the event. So that's why we have try inject overlay here, and then on the attached to here, we want to call the try inject overlay again. And now we have a shared method here that does the work. So we could make this a generic class almost in a way to handle the logic, but it's so small we're not going to bother. Right, so the first thing we want to do is if we are not in the designer, do not try to do this. So avalonia.controls.design is design mode, that's it. If we're not, then return. So this is design time only. Try catch again because we do not want to crash the designer with this. And now in here we can try to do what we want. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create the dialog overlay. So this will be var, what shall we do? Oh, it can be a panel actually, it doesn't need to be a grid or panel. So we want to create housing grid, I guess the grid that's going to hold the control and the overlay. So I guess create grid that will house the overlay and original content. So we'll call this one get control, or get content rather. It's getting the content outside of the control. We'll switch on the control itself. This is also, we can try to do it in one line. And then we can say user control is the type we want to switch on. That's for most of them. We'll call this user control, I guess. And then we can get the content. So a user control will have content. That's the content of the grid. So that's this content, you know, the content that's originally in there. So that's the content we want to grab in this case. We can then say if it's a window, which is another support, then we can add support in here for more things. The window will have content as well. The reason you can't just do it on control is control doesn't have content, because obviously only certain controls do. So we have to pull the content out based on the type. That's the reason we have to do this. And then if not, we can return null. So this is now a function that we've made that's going to call into this to be able to then effectively do this logic. Probably a bit overcomplicated, to be honest. We could probably just do. Yeah, because ultimately we want content, don't we? So we could just do content question mark. In fact, it's an object. So normal object content equals control. It's just that this might be a bit more long-winded. Is user control. And then you can do a switch on it, I think. Use control.content. Otherwise, control is window question mark. So that's your alternative. And you can see that also doesn't like to work that way. Oh, it does work. So yeah, it's going to recommend go back to the switch that we did. So ultimately what we're doing is just checking if one controls one type, returning another. But the easier way to do it is this. So that's actually a bit easier than doing a func. We don't really need a method to call, I don't think. So that gets us the content. And now we need to wrap original content in grid. So this wants to be called original content. So for that we will have a wrapper is new grid. So we just spin up a new grid. And then inside the grid, let's just align everything centrally. There we go. So it's just a central line grid, so the content will naturally align centered. So that means the dialogue, if it wasn't going to fill, would be central aligned as well. And then just simply say in the wrapper, add the original control. And now we need to update so we have now add original content to new grid, update the original control to the wrapper. So at this point, we're going to now replace this grid with the wrapper, which then has the grid in it, if that makes sense. The problem with all this is you kind of can't see it happening because it's in the designer. So if this goes wrong, we're going to have to kind of debug it somehow. So now we need to do the reverse of this again. So we need to say now if the control is user control, UC, then you need to do UC.content is the wrapper. So you need to set it in reverse. I'll save the control as a window. So even though it's the same kind of call, you've got to find the controls. What's wrong with UC? Why is that a problem? It's not inside of... That shouldn't be a problem. I don't get why it's complaining. That variable inside of there shouldn't be exposed outside of this switch, so why is it complaining down there? Either way, shouldn't complain, because look, your window isn't. So why is that? That's a bit strange. That shouldn't be. That literally should not be complaining. That is not a captured point. Window. Yeah, well, how is one? That's got to be a bug in the designer. Let me try and compile. There's no way that's an actual problem. Yeah, what? Maybe that one is stopping that one. So yeah, let's just do UC2. And then you'd presume this would then hit. Yeah, that is strange as. That is very strange. Let's just do this then because, well, yeah, let's just do that for now. Simple. I don't get why that's hitting. That should not be hitting a bug there. And definitely should not be hitting that bug. Now we need to, well, we could do this last, to be honest. We now need to add in here, create dialog overlay. So this is where now we need to create the actual dialog to go inside of this wrapper and sit above the other controls. And before we do that, because this can be run multiple times, in fact, we probably should have checked that before. Yeah, before doing any of this, we probably should have checked if we already have a injected dialog. So probably, where can we check it? So at this point here, if we come back in a second time, the original content would already be the injected wrapper. So once we make a dialog, we're going to inject a grid and we're going to give it an ID. So at this point, if this was the second call, so if this was the second call and already has a dialog, return. So this would then be if original content, which may not be original, we might have already replaced it. There's another problem. The content needs to be, well, actually, no, it isn't. If original content is grid, because it would be a grid, because we're making it a grid here. And grid.children, and then you can just check the type of, or of type rather, of type grid, get them all, and then if any of them have the name, so that's the ID that we're going to give it, of, and we'll probably call it designer dialog overlay. We'll probably extract that out to grid ID, because we'll reuse that. If we then find a grid already in there, we want to return, basically. So that will do a double check that the original content hasn't already been overridden by our injector service itself. And then when we get down to here, now we should be safe to create that dialog overlay. A new one called overlay is a new grid. In here, we want the name to be that grid ID. We don't want it to be hit test. This is all the same properties as the dialog overlay we've already got. Is visible false to start with. Opacity 0. Horizontal alignment is stretch on both, so it fills the grid that it goes inside of. And then we need to do the panel, special syntax for that, panel.zIndex equals, and then we'll just put it nice and high. And that's mimicking, that overlay is now basically what's in the main window. So that's this overlay here. See, it's visible. We're just doing 0 for now, opacity 0. We're stretching it to fill the content it's inside of, because we're just going to basically fill the content. And that's it, really. We just remade a grid. Now you need to add this to the wrapper. So wrapper.children.add. It will sit then alongside the original content, but will be higher because of this Z-index. And in fact, no, that we need a double overlay here. This isn't the overlay we need, because the overlay itself has two things. It has the grid, then it has a border, then it has a content control. So we've got a black background and then another control on top. So we actually need to do another overlay. So we'll have a var, I guess presenter we'll call it, equals new content presenter. Again, horizontal alignment is center, vertical is center. The overlay will have then the presenter, and it will have the border. So we're going to put the actual dialog element inside of this. This will host the dialog, the actual pop-up dialog we want to add. And this overlay is the overall grid. And then we need to also add a black background. So that'll be children.add. We'll just make it direct. New border, background black. Opacity was what, 0.5? Did we have it? Yeah, so we're just basically injecting this and then this. So we're recreating the border and then the content control. So it's probably a bit easier to call this one content. Well, this is dialog host control, really. That's what that one's called. That's the, that's really the dialog overlay grid. So that's like the top level. Probably move that below just because in order of kind of precedence, you have the main overlay, then you have the host that's going to host the actual dialog that's going to pop up. You can have the black background, and then you're going to add the host. That makes a bit more sense. And then I don't think we need to set anything up with the grid, because by default it should have a grid column and a row of 0, and both of these are column row 0. So I think that's it. If we've done that right, that will come into the original content, short circuit if it already has run once. If not, we're going to make a wrapper that's going to host the entire dialog overlay and the original content. So we add the original content, and in fact we probably want to move that down just so it stays in one place. We have the wrapper. In fact, that can also probably move down as well. So let's first start by saying create the entire dialog overlay. That then shows we've added to the wrong place there. That wants to be in the dialog overlay grid. So that's a good catch that we did that, because now we've spotted we added it to the wrong thing. Because that's done again. Dialog overlay grid. There we go. So this all forms the dialog. This then, if we paste back in, we now make the top level wrapper. We add the original content, and we also add the dialog host control. And then we finally add the wrapper. So that's how it all works and bundles together. And now we want to store some references of these that are made. So we have here the overlay grid, which is, did we call it the overlay grid? We called it the dialog overlay grid. So that's what that is. So once we've made them all, let's store the references here. So store weak references. The overlay grid is a new weak reference to the dialog overlay grid. And then the other one was the content presenter, which is the dialogue, basically. So it's the original content, not the original content. Dialogue host control, we've called it. And up here, we've called it the original content. So that's not really what we're storing there as such. We are storing that it's not the original content we want to store a link to, it's the dialogue host control. So we'll call this the dialogue host. And then we'll store a reference to that here as well. New week reference, dialogue host control. So that's going to store the two references. So when we need to show the dialogue, because now we need to be able to handle the showing and hiding, we've got references to what we need, which is the actual host and then the grid inside of it. So this, if we compile, I presume we'll compile. Yep, that's compiled. Let's now go to here and let's also add the dialogue injector. Add dialogue as true. Let's compile and make sure nothing crashes. Now we're not going to see it change here. That's not going to happen. It's going to happen in here. So I guess the only way we're going to know if that's worked is let's instead make this dialogue actually show up and like visually see something. So let's change the opacity here and is visible. So let's just comment those two out. And now that if it's working, we should see a 50% faded black over the top of this. So I don't think that's worked then, because unless I'm doing something wrong, a dialogue grid overlay. I'll tell you, let's just add, let's see if this works then. Let's go to content equals a new border. Let's just literally override the content with a black border. Nope, nothing. Great. So something I don't think will be running because this isn't running. So try inject, get into here. I wonder if we just like throw here, throw new invalid asynchronous exception, something like that. Let's just see if that runs and does anything. So that's not crashing. So we're not running somewhere at the minute. Something isn't working. Add dialogue. Yeah, something's not running. Oh, hang on. It says, look at that at the top, invalid asynchronous state exception. So we can use a throw to find out what's going on. So this is running. We know we're at least getting to here. So let's cut that out. Try inject, get to try inject, get to here. So let's see if we make it to this point here. It's a nice little debug way. Compile that. And there you go, the error's gone. So now we know we're not getting. It's a good little way of debugging. And it's something to do with the adding, obviously. We're adding the control back to itself. It's not the control. It's the original content. We're adding the entire control back to itself. Oh. So, well, we know it's got to be a control. Because we do that. So is it always content or is it always control? Can you just do control? Or can you do var as control? As control. Like that, maybe? And then that's saying it could be null, which obviously, if it's not a control, it will be null. Well, we know content. Content has to be a control, surely. So I guess let's just do a double check. If original content equals null, return. Let's just bounce back and ignore. And then this won't complain. Right, does that work? Hopefully. I mean, the good thing is the code's clearly running. Oh, well, that took a while. What if we crashed on now? Oh, there we go. Control grid already has a visual, it's the same thing, has a visual parent grid while trying to add its children. Oh, that's now this code running. So if we now change this back, so at least that's showing. Change this back now to the wrapper. This should now show the content with that overlay on top of it. So I wonder if, is it because it's basically saying there's no logical parent. So what if we just move this wrapper? Let's try and set at the very top, pretty much, say here. Let's set the wrapper and then let's add the wrapper straight away to the logical tree. So let's do this first. I wonder if it's because we are making a wrapper last and adding content, but in the meantime we're doing stuff here. I'm not sure, to be honest. But let's try and do this first. So the wrapper is now the content, and see if that causes an error. And then after that, the code is the same. I don't know if that's going to work or not. Yes, there we go. It's that simple. So, well, yes and no. Well, yes and no. I'm not sure what's... it's kind of worked. So what did we leave in, maybe? The inner content needs to stretch, doesn't it? So what have we done wrong there? We've set the wrapper to there. This needs to be stretch, I think. The main wrapper needs to be a stretched grid, I think. Yes, there we go. Is that right? Yeah. So now that's the content, and we have an overlay that you can see, we can see through as well. So then if we comment or uncomment that now, we should get the hidden, there we go. So now we have a hidden overlay running in this application. So the last thing we should have to do now is we're going to have to update the dialog service. There's no way around that. So in this dialog service now, we need to make a few small changes. So in here, this dialog service, all we need this to be aware of now is the fact there is a dialog injector service. So instead of just grabbing a host and injecting, we need to tweak this. So first we'll say has overlay host, and that's pretty simple now. It's if we are not in Avalonia .controls.design mode. So if we're not in design mode, then we should expect we already have the overlay in the main view. So then if we have an overlay host, which is basically, we're presuming we are, we're back to the standard logic, which we do this, return, and if not, then fall back to design time. So here now we can say the dialog view is new view locator build on top of the dialog view model. So we can actually get a, we need to convert the view model to a view, so we know what dialog to actually show, because at the minute we pass in a view model, we need to convert that to an actual view. So this will do that for us. If we don't get it, I guess we can just make a new content, just make a random content. Control with the content set to that dialog view model. So I guess then if the view model fails, we'll still see the default, like a default control that just to strings the view model, I guess is what that'll do. And then now we can just say if dialog injector, and this has got reference to it, we need to say show. So try show, I guess. And pass in the dialog view, because that's the thing we need to add to the content presenter. We need to now know what view to show, what actual dialog to show. We do one thing. Otherwise, if we don't have it, then we have a dialog view model dot show, and this is a fallback because. And then before that, actually, we need to trigger this. So this view model should actually have a show method, and this just sets up the view model to know that it's been shown. So we actually need to trigger that anyway. We need to then await for the dialog view model .wait async, and then after we need to do dialog view model.close. So all we're doing here is we're showing the dialog. This doesn't actually show the dialog, it's setting the view model up to say we've shown it. We then need to make a function that actually does show it. We await for the view model to say we've done with it, and then we close it. So this is like how the dialog works, but we haven't actually done anything yet. We need to show the dialog basically. And I think, yeah, I think that'll work. I mean, do we, regardless of that, just do this? And do we care about that? And is this asynchronous? And actually, yeah, let's not trigger the, yeah, so we'll say first, can this show a dialog? If the dialog doesn't just show this, wait this, close this. But then we also need now, as well as a try show, we need a dialog injector.close as well. So this call and this call will open and close the dialog, the actual UI, and these three calls are the view model setting up. I think that's correct. So now if we make a try show, in here, this is where we just need to actually try and show the dialog. So for this first thing again, let's just do the check. If not, in design time mode, so Avalonia.controls.design.is-design mode return. So we only want to run this in design time just as a fallback safety. Now we need to get the overlay. So the overlay grid dot try get target, was it? Try get target out for overlay isn't equal to true. So if we basically fail to get the grid, or if we get the grid but it's null, then return false as well. So basically, if we don't have the overlay created yet, we can't do anything with it. Same thing with the presenter. So with the, what did we call the presenter thing? The dialog host. So if the, basically same logic here. If the dialog host is null, then we can't do anything. So we need to make sure we've got them. That's all the null guards done. And now all we need to do is we need to say the dialog host dot content, which, bear in mind this, why is that not working? That should be, yeah, content presenter. Oh, sorry, it's the host here we generated. The host content now can be the content we've passed in, so the dialog view. Then we can show the overlay now. So the overlay dot is visible. It's true. Overlay dot hit test. So we're just setting them properties that we set to false or back to true. Overlay dot opacity equals 1. And then return true because it should be shown at that point. So that's the show. And then similar to the public static void close, this one's a bit easier. We need to say if, basically if the overlay, if we have it. So if the overlay is true this time and isn't null, so we basically have an overlay, then we can do all these three in reverse. So we can set them to false, false, and 0. I guess, to be honest, that's not even needed because if this is true, this has to be set. Yeah, so that's fine. Now, you could probably negate that, so that's fine, but it can't negate that because after this, we need to say the same thing for the presenter. So basically, if that's true, so we have the presenter, clear the content, so host.content equals null. So I think if we've done that right, we now show the UI, show UI, set up and await view model calls, and then close UI. So that's now the show dialog being aware of either the normal method, which is runtime, or this little special design time injectory service. So I think if that's all right, this should be the final thing. So if we click this, yes, look at that. We are now have a dynamic overlay. So does that actually work then? So new job, delete, yes. Look at that. New job, delete, no. That's really cool. So we now have a completely dynamic dialog. The key is, does this still work or have we broken the runtime stuff? So action, new, delete, yes, that still works. That's crazy. That was a lot of work, but that's now working. So all we have to do to effectively allow dialogs to work is to do these three things here. So if we went to another view, say, and we looked at this one, and you'll see this won't work. But if we just simply paste this in, maybe we can just click. Yeah, don't even have to compile. Straight away, we then have a dialogue. That is really cool. So that was a lot longer than I expected. That was normally I try to break these episodes down into digestible chunks, but I figured this one would be better to just hit out in one home run. Luckily, we haven't had too many issues, and the idea has worked great. So the top level now we can get in a designer. I don't think there's any bugs here. We might have, if we find out we've got like memory leaks or something, we'll keep an eye on the riders, memory usage and stuff, but I think we've accounted for all of the possible issues. So now we finally have the ability to show dialogues using the dependency injection and everything else that's the same as runtime, but just dynamically creating a dialogue overlay during designer time. I don't think anybody else has ever done this as far as I know, so this is quite a useful feature. That's it for this one, guys. I'll catch you in the next.